All right, let's start with our prayer before study. Christ, my Lord, the giver of light and wisdom, who opened the eyes of the blind man and transformed the fishermen into wise heralds and teachers of the gospel through the coming of the Holy Spirit, shine also in my mind the light of the grace of the Holy Spirit. Grant me discernment, understanding, and wisdom and learning. Enable me to complete my assignments and to abound in every good work, for to you I give honor and glory. Amen. Most blessed Lord, send the grace of your Holy Spirit on me to strengthen me, that I may learn well the subject I am about to study, and by it become a better person, for your glory, the comfort of my family, and the benefit of your church and our nation. Amen. All right, before we do anything else, let me ask you if anybody needs help on your paper, on your Moby Dick paper. Hopefully you have chosen a topic and outlined it, and if you haven't, you've only hurt yourself. I guess it's not my problem, it's your pain, right? Because it's still due next week, regardless. But hopefully, if you've outlined it and started writing, you've made life easier for yourself. Does anybody have a specific question? Does anybody have a problem? Or you chose a particular topic, and but I can't think of what I want to say or how to organize it. Does anybody have a issue? Right. If an issue arises, you know how to find me, and let me know. Don't suffer. Just say, I'm working on it, but I don't know how to put this together. I don't know how to relate this. I don't know how to split this into 2 paragraphs or whatever. Ask me and we'll work on it together, okay? I want you to bring those next week. The other thing for next week is you're just going to keep reading Crime and Punishment and keep summarizing your chapters and keep track of characters through the end of part 3. So this week we read part 2, the first 4 chapters of part 2. Next week read all the way to the end of part 3. And then we'll be halfway through the book at that point. We're reading this in 4 weeks. Any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward. All right, let's look at Robert Frost. I love Robert Frost. Everybody loves Robert Frost. He is an American poet from New England, from the Northeast, and very well known. And I would be just highly shocked if none of you had met at least one of these poems previous to this class. But if you haven't, congratulations, because you're meeting them today. Again, we only have 3 more classes for everybody for their poems. I've got it on the email, but I'm considering this an incomplete class if you haven't done a poem. And I'm telling your parents so, which means you don't get a passing grade. I told you the very first day of class that you had to recite a poem, and so you've had 8 months. I feel like that's ample. But if you are just desperate and haven't chosen a poem, which not a good idea, stopping by woods on a snowy evening is a good choice. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but I think what I like about Robert Frost is he has, if you think about his poems a little while, you see things buried in them that you didn't see at first, because they seem so easy. All right. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not mind me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake this darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. All right, what's he doing? Yeah, and what's he decide to do?
Enjoy the scenery, basically.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop here and enjoy the scenery. I think I know who owns this forest area, but his house is in town. He doesn't care if I stop here and watch his woods fill up with snow. What does my horse think? Well, how is he being conveyed? Does that mean? How is the author of this poem Is he riding in a minivan? Is he riding in a pickup truck?
He's riding on the back of a horse.
He's riding, yes, he's either on the back of a horse or he is in some sort of carriage, like a sleigh, because his horse has harness bells. Gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there's a mistake. Do you really want to stop here? And that's the only sound, right? Except the sound of the snow. Why doesn't he just stay and watch it longer?
He has promises to keep.
What do you think that means?
You might have to go somewhere that night to visit someone or do something.
It could be very simple, right? I told my wife I'd be home for dinner. You know, I told the kids I'd read them a story before bed tonight. Yeah, I've got to stop in on my parents because I promise I've got miles to go before I sleep. Now, that's all easy enough. Guy riding in a sleigh or riding on horseback, stops in the woods, watches the snow. Awesome, but I guess I got to move on, and he goes on his way. Seems very simple, but and it's a fine enough poem if that's the only reason you wrote a poem about this moment. But miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. He says it twice, which always makes me prick up my attention. You know, if an author decides to repeat something exactly the same way twice, like, okay, apparently I'm really supposed to notice that. And I'm wondering if it could mean something more. What do you think, Noah?
He has to live his life before he dies. That's why he emphasized it twice.
He might have miles to go. Right? You know, remember Pilgrim's Progress? In Pilgrim's Progress, the Christian life is like what? What is happening in Pilgrim's Progress? It's like a journey, right? This is a standard metaphor, right? Life is like a journey. And you take a break. Christian took a break. Remember, he's climbing up that pretty steep hill, and there was an arbor there for the enjoyment of travelers. But he lay down and took a nap. And he lost his scroll. Well, he had to go back for it later, and he was getting in to his next destination too late. He stayed too long. You get a little break, but you stay too long, it messes up the rest of the journey, right? We're not supposed to stay forever in the woods and watch it snow. We just get a little break. So, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that he might be telling us this is what life is like. You know, we get lovely moments, but you can't stay there. Because there's only one thing that stays the same in life, and it's that it's always changing. Nothing stays the same, and that's the only thing that stays the same. All right. This is probably Robert Frost's most famous poem. So I highly recommend it. This is his also other most famous poem, which I love. Everybody loves this poem, I think. This one's a little deeper, but it's not too hard to see the literal, the surface, and the underneath. It's called The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. All right, let's be very literal. What did this guy do literally?
He chose between two roads.
He is walking through the woods. We've all done this, right? We've gone on a hike. You know those trails that you think it's a trail, but then you follow it a little and suddenly it's not a trail anymore? Like, oh, I guess, because there was no sign. You know, it's like, it seems like a trail until it doesn't anymore. But these were two reasonably visible trails. And how does he decide which one to take?
The road that wasn't taken.
Okay, he said, the one that was grassy and wanted wear. It lacked wear. But then he turns right around and says this, though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. He just contradicted himself. He said, well, it seemed to me that one, is less traveled. But, really, they were worn about the same. But I picked that one because it seemed a little grassier to me. It seemed lonely. And what are the chances he will now ever come back and get on that other path?
Almost none.
Almost none. If you're me, you won't ever be able to find your way back because I really don't know where I am in the woods, and I really don't know where I am. Even with the sign, I don't really know where I am, But usually you don't follow a trail for a mile or two and say, now let's retrace that several miles and then go back to the fork in the road and then take the other. No, you hope they'll match up somewhere, right? Now, so easy enough. I just keep following the path. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm probably, when I'm elderly, not going to be talking about some path I picked in the woods somewhere at some public park. Unless I got lost there and I was there for a really, really long time, in which case maybe I would. Yes, Dominic? So we're talking about something else now, aren't we? And maybe we have been talking about something else all along. Yeah, life. Life. You guys are of an age and are rapidly approaching it where you're making decisions. You're starting to make decisions, right, that are going to have long-term impact on you. You're choosing schools, you're choosing spouses, you're making choices. And once you get on that road, you don't go back. You can't hit undo. He picked the one less traveled by. So what do you think he might mean by that? What road do you think this speaker chose that was less traveled?
Probably the narrow path to heaven.
Okay. That is certainly one interpretation. It is very interesting to me that we're told, broad is the path and wide is the gate that leads to destruction, but narrow is the path that leads to life. So Christianity is definitely the road less traveled. True Christianity. Even in Christian eras of history, true Christianity was, people who really, really staked their life on it. So that is one interpretation. Is there any other thing that perhaps our speaker has done that is not a heavily traveled road? What does he do for a living? He writes poems. He's a poet. He's a writer. There aren't a lot of people who choose that road. It's a hard road, isn't it? It's hard to make a living. It's always been hard to make a living as a writer. Is this Robert Frost talking? We don't know. But it's coming from a poem. This is coming from the mouth of a poet, and maybe the fact that he chose to be a poet. He chose a not normal career. But it's made all the difference. Do you take that in a good way or a bad way?
A good way. It sounds like he's saying that in a good way.
It does sound good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it could, and that's made all the difference. Oh my gosh, if only I hadn't done that. But I just don't read that. It doesn't sound like that to me. It's made all the difference that I chose the narrow, less trodden path. Okay, spend some time with Robert Frost. If you like these, I just highly recommend Robert Frost. Some of his poems are a little less obvious, maybe, but they're really pretty easy to get into. And you can just Google Robert Frost and poetry all over the internet. All right, let's talk about crime and punishment. These are my crazy notes all over me. Let's see. I always start off sort of organized, and then I never leave enough space. And then I run out, and then I have arrows. It always happens. I don't know why I don't just get another piece of paper, but I never do. All right. Why in the world does Raskolnikov axe murder a couple of people? Let's just throw it out there. Let's not even beat around the bush. What is his motive?
Basically, that he's gonna like a Robin Hood style person. That was after he heard like what the people he overheard that he overhears a lot of conversation.
He does, doesn't he?
Quite a bit, yeah.
So, the particular conversations. Everybody remember the conversation Neil is talking about.
Yeah.
Raskolnikov. First of all, let's look how we meet this guy. Because I feel like the way a book starts, this is should be noted. On an exceptionally hot evening, early in July, a young man came out of the garret in which he lodged in S Place and walked slowly as though in hesitation towards Cambridge. He had successfully avoided meeting his landlady on the staircase. His garret was under the roof of a high 5-storied house and was more like a cupboard than a room. The landlady, who provided him with garret dinners and attendance, lived on the floor below, and every time he went out he was obliged to pass her kitchen, the door of which invariably stood open. And each time he passed, the young man had a sick, frightened feeling, which made him scowl and feel ashamed. He was hopelessly in debt to his landlady and was afraid of meeting her. This was not because he was cowardly and abject, quite the contrary. But for some time past, he had been in an overstrained, irritable condition, verging on hypochondria. He had become so completely absorbed in himself and isolated from his fellows that he dreaded meeting not only his landlady, but anyone at all. He was crushed by poverty, but the anxieties of his position had of late ceased to weigh upon him. He had given up attending to matters of practical importance. He had lost all desire to do so. Nothing that any landlady could do had a real terror for him. But to be stopped on the stairs, to be forced to listen to her trivial, irrelevant gossip, to pestering demands for payment, threats and complaints, and to rack his brains for excuses, to prevaricate, to lie, no. Rather than that, he would creep down the stairs like a cat and slip out unseen. All right, I'm going to go back to that in a minute. So, he's very, very poor. He owes his landlady a lot of money, and he has no prospects. We discover, as we read, that he was a student, but he's a dropout. He's a law school dropout. And what does he live on? Like, what little money he gets, where does it come from? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, he pawns things, but it sounds like he hasn't done that much. Where does he also get money from? Somebody sends him money. His mom. Is his mom rolling in cash?
No. She's on like a pension.
She's on a pension, and she has to borrow money to send to him sometimes. He's like every mother's worst nightmare, right? He's just a deadbeat. He's a deadbeat. This is what he is. He's a deadbeat, dropout. Get a job, Raskolnikov. His mother doesn't know this and doesn't feel this way. But, so I asked, why does he murder this lady?
Because
Go ahead, Gabriel. What were you going to say?
one, he keeps thinking she rips him off on some deep
Okay.
stuff.
Okay. But does poverty seem to be a major motive?
It does.
Possibly. However, I just read to you that it said of late he doesn't care about the poverty. He doesn't care about his landlady. Let me read it again. He was crushed by poverty, but the anxieties of his position had of late ceased to weigh upon him. I'm poor and I don't care anymore. Now, the stuff that he steals after the murder, does he live better on that? Proceeds of that?
Like literally hides it.
He's like the worst thief in the history of the universe if he's trying to get rich off of murdering people and stealing their stuff. Dude, take the money. Not crud that you don't even...
They can't sell it.
I can't sell it. And then he doesn't even look in the little purse to see how much cash is in there before he stashes it under the rock. So we might say, oh, I get it. Poor guy is going to murder and steal because he's starving, but he doesn't do anything with it. And then right at the beginning of the book, Dostoevsky tells us he didn't even care about his poverty anymore. But he'd been in a funk, we might say, for about a month. He said, withdrawn. I don't want to talk to anybody. Well, you people are idiots. Just leave me alone. Yeah. And Nastasia, who's the landlady's serving girl, right? She brings him his soup or whatever. And what does she say repeatedly when she comes in and finds him in there? Do you remember? Like, it seems like she says the same thing frequently. Well, yeah, do you want your food? But then she sees him laying on his couch and she says, yeah, oh, are you awake? Why do you sleep all the time? You don't do anything but sleep. You just lay there. What kind of life is this? Do you want to get up and do something? Have you been napping all afternoon? Like, she's always after. So you get the idea he's been laying on that couch in that little room. By the way, I don't know if you read this part yet. And it's not a spoiler in any sense. But at one point, somebody comes to the door and he needs to open the door, unlock the door, and he can do it without getting off the couch.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Did you catch that? That's how small the room is. The couch that is his bed and his couch. And I don't know how small this room is. It's not a good room.
Probably.
When you-
all the people helping him come in and they're kind of like cramming.
Yeah, and they all cram in because there's not room. So yes, he's poor, but he doesn't seem to be motivated primarily by his poverty. Okay, so let me keep reading from where I just left off. He says, this evening, however, on coming out into the street, he became acutely aware of his fears. I want to attempt a thing like that, and am frightened by these trifles, he thought with an odd smile. Yes, it's all in a man's hands, and he lets it all slip from cowardice. That's an axiom. It would be interesting to know what it is men are most afraid of. Taking a new step, uttering a new word, is what they fear most. But I'm talking too much. It's because I chatter that I do nothing. Or perhaps it is that I chatter because I do nothing. I've learned to chatter this last month, lying for days in my den, thinking. Why am I going there now? Am I capable of that? Is that serious? It's not serious at all. Simply a fantasy to amuse myself. Am I the kind of person that could do that? What's he talking about? Yeah, he's been plotting this for a while. He's playing it all
Even,
out.
like, the beginning of the book, might have been chapter 1, as he was like leaving the pawn shop, he was like, wait. He was pondering. He was like thinking about it as he left the pawn shop.
Yeah,
the first
yeah,
time.
and like I shouldn't wear this kind of hat when I come to do it because this is a stupid-looking hat and it makes me stand out. So, but just to confirm, so it's not a pawn. It's really just the lady's apartment. There is no pawn shop per se, right? She lives on the 4th floor or whatever of this apartment building, which plays into the plot because he's got to pass all the other apartments as he goes up and down. So anyway, so what Neil mentioned, that he overhears, he wanders, do you notice he wanders around a lot randomly? And not really knowing where he's going. And so he's he goes and he does his little trial run with the pawnbroker later. He's like checking out the situation. He's like, okay, yeah. And then I'm going to tell her. He plants a little, oh, I might be back in a few days with a cigarette case, but then he wanders around. He's like, well, how am I going to do it? I don't know. And because the sister, what am I going to do about the sister? And then he just wanders into a place where he overhears people talking about the sister and saying, oh, we've arranged to meet up with her at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. He's like, 7 o'clock tomorrow night, the sister's going to be gone. It's almost like a coincidence. What were you going to say, Neil?
I was just wondering, because like when I read the stench from the pot houses, do they mean like actual like drugs?
No, it just means taverns.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure what that means, and this is all in a translation, but no, I don't think it has anything to do with marijuana. But yes, this occurred to me when I read it too. I'm like, pot houses? But no, I don't think so. So he sits down in a tavern, and there are a student apparently and some sort of government official, officer, they call him, a soldier, he is. And they just happen to be talking about the woman that he's planning to murder and her sister. What are the chances?
They're playing billiards, right?
She's first rate, he said. You can always get money from her. She's as rich as a Jew, and she can give you 5,000 rubles at a time, and she's not above taking a pledge for a ruble. Lots of our fellows have dealings with her. She's an awful old harpy. And he began describing how spiteful and uncertain she was, how if you were only a day late with your interest, the pledge was lost, how she gave a quarter of the value of an article and took 5 and even 7% a month on it, and so on. The student chattered on, saying she had a sister, Lizaveta, whom the wretched little creature, who was continually beating, and kept in complete bondage like a small child, though Lizaveta was at least 6 feet high. And then they start talking about Lizaveta, and the conversation goes on, and it says, I'll tell you what. I could kill that damn old woman and make off with her money, I assure you, without the faintest conscience prick, the student added with warmth. The officer laughed again, while Raskolnikov shuddered. How strange it was. Listen, I want to ask you a serious question, the student said hotly. I was joking, of course, but look here. On one side, we have a stupid, senseless, worthless, spiteful, ailing, horrid old woman, not simply useless, but doing actual mischief, who has not an idea what she is living for herself, and who will die in a day or two in any case. You understand? You understand? Yeah, I understand, answered the officer, watching his excited companion attentively. Well, listen then. On the other side, fresh young lives thrown away for want of help by the thousands on every side. 100,000 good deeds could be done and helped on that old woman's money, which will be buried in a monastery. Hundreds, thousands perhaps, might be set on the right path. Dozens of families saved from destitution, from ruin, from vice, from the lock hospitals, all with her money. Kill her, take her money, and with the help of it, devote oneself to the service of humanity and the good of all. What do you think? Would not one tiny crime be wiped out by thousands of good deeds? For one life, thousands would be saved from corruption and decay. One death, and 100 lives in exchange. It's simple arithmetic. Besides, what value has the life of that sickly, stupid, ill-natured old woman in the balance of existence? No more than the life of a louse, of a black beetle. Less, in fact, because the old woman is doing harm. She's wearing out the lives of others. The other day she bit Lizaveta's finger out of spite, almost had to be amputated. Of course, she does not deserve to live, remarked the officer. But there it is. There's nature. Oh, well, brother, but we have to correct and direct nature. But for that, we should drown in an ocean of prejudice. All right. So what's his argument?
Who, the student?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Kill the old lady and like save like a couple other lives because her life is useless.
Yeah.
Distribute the money.
It's not really a bad thing. I mean, it's a net good. It would be a net positive. She's useless, and even worse than useless, because she does harm. And think how much good we could do with her money. And Raskolnikov's listening to all this. Now, here's the question. Does Raskolnikov try to do anything good with the money he steals?
No, he literally just murders her. And her sister.
And her sister, which we don't hear. She is, we would say, collateral damage,
Yeah.
that she wasn't intended, but we don't Just kind of, they always say, and he killed that old pawnbroker woman. I'm like, and her sister, hello, the innocent sister who, okay. We could do so much good to people. Now, Raskolnikov is ripe to hear an argument like this, even though he doesn't really act on it, because in his previous trip to a random tavern, he ran into a guy named Marmeladov. Marmeladov. What's Marmeladov's issue?
He's like the drunk of that tavern.
He's just a stinking drunk. And he's lost his job, he's drunk all his family's money, and he's stolen money from them. And he hasn't been home in several days at this point because he's afraid to go home because his wife's going to be really mad. Yeah. His wife has children from a previous marriage who are starving and dressed in rags while he sits there and drinks. And he has a daughter named Sonia. What is Sonia doing to help out the situation? This is unsavory, but Sonia is a very important character and we need to talk about it. She's become a prostitute. She has become a prostitute. Her stepmother told her to become a prostitute because they need the money. And in fact, I want to read it because, and why didn't I? Oh, here we go. I was lying drunk, and I heard my Sonia saying, she's a gentle creature with a soft little voice, fair hair, and such a pale, thin little face. She said, Katerina Ivanovna, am I really to do a thing like that? And why not? Said Katerina with a jeer. You're something mighty precious to be so careful of. But don't blame her, honored sir, don't blame her. She's not herself when she spoke, but driven to distraction by her illness and the crying of the hungry children. By the way, Katerina Ivanovna is also apparently dying of tuberculosis, to make this even worse. And it was said more to wound her than anything. For Katerina Ivanovna's character, and when children cry even from hunger, she falls to beating them at once. At 6 o'clock, I saw Sonia get up, put on her kerchief and her cape, and go out of the room. And about 9 o'clock, she came back. She walked straight up to Katerina Ivanovna, and she laid 30 rubles on the table before her in silence. She did not utter a word. She did not even look at her. But she simply picked up our big green shawl, put it over her head and face, and lay down on the bed with her face to the wall. Only her little shoulders and her body kept shuddering because she's crying. This is what's happened in this family. I feel like the Marmeladov family is exhibit A of the people who could be helped with the pawnbroker lady's money. It's awful. Raskolnikov helps Marmeladov home, and his wife, indeed, starts screaming at him, and it's very understandable, and coughing and screaming, coughing and screaming. And Raskolnikov leaves them money. Where did he get that money?
Is it part of what he got from the pawn?
He hasn't murdered her yet when this happened. Where did we say he gets money periodically? His mother scrimped and saved and borrowed to send him money, and he goes drinking in taverns, but he put it on the windowsill. It says he grabbed his, whatever, it's just like the change from his drink, and he just put it on the windowsill. He leaves, and almost immediately, let me find that. I don't know why I take all these notes. I can't ever find, and all these flags. Well, see, I was at the place. Just hang on. Yeah, I'll never find it again. He leaves, and he says almost immediately, but I wanted that money. I needed that money. That's the only money I have to live on. Why did I just give them all my money? Then, remember this incident. he is randomly walking around town, and he sees a girl, not very old, teenage girl maybe, and she's obviously not okay. She just can't walk straight. She's obviously drunk, and her clothes aren't put on right. Her clothes are. She's been gotten drunk and assaulted. Someone's gotten her drunk and assaulted her. And Raskolnikov sees her and he follows her, but he sees this other guy following. And do you remember this episode? What does he think the other guy's up to?
He thinks the other guy's trying to.
Like, take advantage.
Yes, like he's some sort of predator. You know, he sees a woman in a bad way, and he's going to take advantage of the situation. And Raskolnikov just protects this girl. He calls the police. He says, you've got to help her get home, get her a cab. And he goes up to the guy, and he says, "Hey, you, Svidrigailov." He calls him by name, the guy who's sort of watching. This kind of plump, smarmy-looking, greasy sort, you know. Okay. Who is Svidrigailov? This is our day of keeping all our cast of characters straight. Does anybody remember? You might not have written him down because it might not have seemed like an important character, but it is an important character. Okay, back at the beginning of the book.
Wasn't he like the guy with his mother and sisters? Yeah.
Yes, his sister Dunia had taken a job as a governess, and Svidrigailov was the father of the household. Svidrigailov is a womanizer. He's the kind, like, he's chasing all the serving girls constantly. He's that sort. So, Raskolnikov, hey, you Svidrigailov, you're that sort, right? He doesn't mean you are Svidrigailov, he means you're that kind. You prey on women, on innocent women. So this guy had propositioned Dunia. It's like, oh, we'll take money, run away with me, whatever. And Dunia said, no way. And when the guy's wife found out, Marfa Petrovna, when she found out about it, she blamed Dunia. Fired her, bad-mouthed her all over town. She's trying to steal my husband, which was not true at all. And then finally, when she found out the truth, she went around and apologized to everybody. So Dunia lost her position, and she needed that money. It was good money, and they needed it. And then Svidrigailov didn't once step in to say, my wife is bad-mouthing this girl unjustly. So again, we see another case here. This drunk girl who's in a bad way is another. This is the sort that money could help. And Raskolnikov jumps in immediately. He reaches into his pocket again. It's like, oh, here's all the money I have in my pocket currently. Get her a cab. Get her a cab. So here's the tough question. Is Raskolnikov a complete and utter rotter to the core?
I mean, no. I mean, there's definitely a good mix, but
Yeah, I mean, who does that sort of thing? Who helps drunken guys get home and leaves the family money and then shadows girls on the street because you think they might be in danger and calls the police to help them and gives them the rest of the money? What were you going to say, Dominic?
He's a broken man.
He's very broken. You know what? I only found this out last week. Raskol in Russian means broken or ripped apart or in pieces. He's Raskolnikov. He's not, see, this would be easier for me if he's just like, he's just John Wayne Gacy or Ted Bundy or whatever, some serial killer, you know, who even they may have had good moments, right? We don't know. But he's the worst human being I can possibly imagine, who would go just bash people's heads in with an axe. But he's not. He hears that Dunia is going to marry this guy named Lutzen, and he just loses it. She's basically doing what Sonia did. She's selling herself for money, only she's just agreeing to marry the guy to rescue me from poverty and our mom from poverty. She doesn't love this guy. This guy isn't going to be nice to her. It's going to be a terrible life, and she's just going to marry him. I won't have it. I'm stopping. He cares. But he's also simultaneously planning to axe murder someone. For, at this point, kind of unknown reasons. He's poor, but he says, but the author tells us that poverty isn't bothering him so much. He overhears people saying her money could do so much good. Then why didn't you clean out the purse and go take it to the Marmeladov family then? No, I'll bury it under the rock. I'll bury it in the alley. We just don't know. Another thing. So, not very long before he commits the murder, he has a weird dream. He's a little boy in the dream. And do you remember there's this horse? And it's an old broken down horse. And this guy comes out of a tavern and he loads just tons of people in the wagon. And the horse can't pull all those people. The horse is old and tired. And he just beats the horse unmercifully, the guy. And they're laughing. It's like, we'll make him run, we'll make him run. And little Raskolnikov, he's a little boy and he's there with his dad and he's crying. Make them stop. They're beating the horse, they're hurting the horse. And he wakes up and he says, I'm about to cry over a stupid dream I just had. And I think I'm going to go murder people. He says that over and over. Why do you think he goes ahead and does it? I'm not fishing. I don't have an answer.
Maybe like he was planning to distribute the money and stuff like that when he originally did it.
Maybe.
But like after the murders, he just became like so terrified. He's just like, I gotta cover my tracks. I gotta hide everything.
Yeah.
So they can't find me.
So as you guys surely have seen enough of this sort of movie or read this sort of book that if somebody is poor and then suddenly they start spending cash like nobody's business, you pretty much know they did something nefarious to get the money, right? I mean, it's a dead giveaway that you're not supposed to have all that money if you're on a spending spree. So, yeah, Dominic, were you going to add something? Okay. Okay, I read earlier that he, at the very beginning, in the first chapter, how he didn't want to meet his landlady, not so much because he was worried about the money he owed her, but he just didn't want to deal with people. And then listen to this. It says, it would have been, this is a description of him in his little room, it would have been difficult to sink to a lower ebb of disorder. But to Raskolnikov, in his present state of mind, this was positively agreeable. He had got completely away from everyone, like a tortoise in its shell. And even the sight of the servant girl who had to wait upon him and looked sometimes into his room made him writhe with nervous irritation. He was in the condition that overtakes some monomaniacs, entirely concentrated upon one thing. Like a tortoise in his shell. He's withdrawn from society. What did we read? We've talked about this already this year. Was it Victor Frankenstein? I don't think so. What happens to you when you're withdrawn? Maybe it was one of the poems we read. I can remember the conversation, but I can't remember the material. Is it good sometimes to be alone?
It is.
Is it good to perpetually be alone? You know, even the Desert Fathers got together periodically for joint church services, and they weren't always alone. Even in monasteries, they're not always alone, even if they're in their individual cells. So, what has created this sickness in him? By the way, he gets sick after the murder. Is he sick before the murder?
No.
Is he completely normal before the murder?
No.
He says he's been laying around for a month not doing anything. But we're not clear. He's not feverish, apparently, before. All right. So let me read something else that gives us Raskolnikov's attitude. Okay, it's right there. And first of all, I want to go back to those guys talking about whether or not the old lady is just a louse and she's not worth anything and you should just kill her. And where was that? Oh, I got it. Okay. And I want to reread something that one of them said in this conversation about does she deserve to live. He says, well, brother, the officer says, well, it's just nature. It's just people are just like that. You know, some people are crummy and some people are good. And oh, well, brother, but we have to correct and direct nature. And but for that, we should drown in an ocean of prejudice. But for that, there would never have been a single great man. They talk of duty, conscience. I don't want to say anything against duty and conscience, but the point is, what do we mean by them? All right? He said, if we didn't correct nature, we would drown in an ocean of prejudice. What does this even mean? But we've read this phrase already before. Let me read it in the other place. He leaves the Marmeladovs. And did I lose it again? Here we go. I'm sorry. This is what happens when I have so many tabs. We're blaming this all on the fact that I don't feel very good today. Seriously. Oh, here we go. This is the place I was looking for before. As he went out, Raskolnikov had time to put his hand into his pocket to snatch up the coppers he had received in exchange for his ruble in the tavern and lay them in the window for the Marmeladovs. Afterwards on the stairs, he changed his mind and would have gone back. What a stupid thing I've done, he thought. They have Sonia and I want it for myself. But reflecting that it would be impossible to take it back now, and that in any case he would not have taken it, but dismissed it with a wave of his hand, he went back to his lodging. Sonia wants pomatum too, he said, walking along the street, and he laughed malignantly. Such smartness costs money. Marmeladov had said, well, you know, we need money too for Sonia, because if she's going to be a prostitute, she's got to look attractive. So we need makeup and nice clothes for Sonia. You know, that's a household expense now. Stuff for Sonia to make herself attractive. He says, hurrah for Sonia. What a mine they've dug there. And they're making the most of it. Yes, they're making the most of it. They've wept over it and grown used to it. Man grows used to everything, the scoundrel. He sank into thought. And what if I am wrong? He cried suddenly after a moment's thought. What if man is not really a scoundrel? Man in general, I mean, the whole race of mankind. Then all the rest is prejudice. Simply artificial terrors, and there are no barriers, and it's all as it should be. Right. This is hard. I'm not sure I totally understand what's going on here, so you guys are going to help me. Raskolnikov says, if people are just scoundrels, people in general, you know, and they put their daughter out to be a prostitute, and they get used to it. They cry over it a little bit, and then it's normal. It's normal. Because people are just scoundrels. And he stops and says, well, what if people aren't scoundrels? Then he says, then all the rest is prejudice. What in the world could he mean? Look, you look at the Marmeladov family. Look at them in your mind right now. Katerina is coughing and screaming at the and beating those children who are dressed in rags and they're starving, while Marmeladov drinks all their money and sends his daughter out as a prostitute. Got the picture? It's not pretty. I look at them, I'm seeing them in my mind, and I'm like, what a bunch of losers. What a bunch of scoundrels. She's a bad mother because she beats the children and she doesn't understand they're hungry. And he's a bad father, and they're just all a bunch of scoundrels. I could think that. What if they're not? What if they're no more scoundrels than any other human being? Then all the rest is prejudice. How might prejudice come into it?
Prejudice, like, we can't tell how everyone else is feeling or raised or thinking. We aren't them. We won't ever be able to understand exactly why they do these things. Like, we won't be able to understand why someone would harm another person unless we were that person.
But we make up our minds about it, don't we? We think we know. Well, a family like that, well, you know how that happened. Guys, this is my confession. It's been me. I've looked at maybe, looked at somebody who's in poverty. It's like, well, there are jobs. You might have brought this on yourself. Oh my gosh, even if it's true, what a wicked thing to think, right? And maybe it's not true at all. People get sick and medical bills pile up and they lose their homes. I don't know that they just made bad decisions and went on shopping sprees. I don't know. It's prejudice, right? Like, I've judged this group of people are in this condition because they're scoundrels or they're lazy or whatever. But I don't know. It's just simply prejudice. It's like we look at somebody who's wealthy. Maybe they are very hardworking and thrifty. Maybe they inherited it all. I don't know. So he says, what if human beings aren't scoundrels? What if we can't just walk around deciding that old pawnbroker ladies are just lice? Right? Because I don't see any good she does. What if the rest is just prejudice? And like, she's in this category, you're in that category, you're that category. And that's what prejudice means, right? It means to judge something in advance. I find out somebody's in a category, whatever that category may be. So I know what you're like. I know what kind of person you are. And then, so let's go back to what the officer and the student said. When they're talking about, just kill her and take her property and I can't leave my fingers in this. I keep losing my spots. Okay. He says, well, we have to correct and direct nature. This may be nature that some people are just like that. We have to direct it. But for that, we should drown in an ocean of prejudice. If we don't act on what we see and know to be true, it's just prejudice. I don't know, guys. It sounds like he's saying the opposite to me of what Raskolnikov said. Raskolnikov's like, well, we don't know. It's just prejudice that I think the Marmeladovs of the world are this way or the Sonias of the world are this way. But this guy, the student, says, if we don't direct nature, if we don't correct the people who are going astray, then it's all just prejudice. I don't know. We'll have to think about that. I'm not sure what to do about that. But it certainly has something to do with the fact that we think that we can decide who's fit to live and who's fit to die, or whose life is worth more than someone else's life. Are the Marmeladovs worth more than the pawnbroker lady? Is that drunk, assaulted girl wandering down the street, is she worth more than the pawnbroker lady? And I mean, I don't think it's terrible if there's a little piece of us that says, yeah, they're worth a lot more. They're much more worthy. Maybe not Marmeladov drinking all the, but the mother dying of tuberculosis and trying to take care of her kids. But can I make that judgment call? No. Does Raskolnikov think he can make that judgment call?
In one case, yes.
Apparently he does. He does. But have you noticed we still haven't come away with a smoking gun? This is why I'm going to kill her. Well, we know. I've been thinking about killing her, maybe for a long time, but certainly for the past month. I've been laying on my couch in my little room brooding on it. And now it's like destiny is beckoning to me, right? I've overheard, oh, the sister's going to be gone. I know that the old woman's going to be alone. Let me think what direction I want to go. Oh, okay. Let's look at this. This is after he sees the girl that is wandering down the street, and he looks at the bench she collapsed on, sat down on. Poor girl, he said, looking at the empty corner where she had sat. She will come to herself and weep, and then her mother will find out, and she will give her a beating, a horrible, shameful beating, and then maybe turn her out of doors. And so he thinks about what else might happen. Have I not seen cases like that? And how have they been brought to it? Why, they've all come to it like that. Ugh. But what does it matter? That's as it should be, they tell us. A certain percentage, they tell us, must every year go that way, to the devil, I suppose, so that the rest may remain chaste and not be interfered with. A percentage. What splendid words they have. They are so scientific, so consolatory. Once you've said percentage, there's nothing more to worry about. If we had any other word, maybe we might feel more uneasy. But what if dunya were one of the percentage of another one, if not that one? What does he mean? That it sounds different to say a certain percent of people this will happen to versus it happened to my sister. Miriam, you go for it. Completely takes the emotion out of it. Is that what you're going to say, Dominic? Thank you for giving it to your sister. Yeah. Sucks any human connection you have with it. Do we do that a lot today? Does the news media, and do we quantify things, if you know what I mean? Like we add them up and number them, and then it makes us feel better. You know, X percent of people are out of work, for example, like the unemployment rate. But is it different to you if it's your dad that's unemployed suddenly? Yeah, it's a huge difference to you. What happened in the things we've read this year that made us pay more attention to quantifying things and adding things up and giving statistics rather than giving individual cases? Is this the spirit of something we've talked about before this year?
Yeah, René Descartes.
Descartes, right? I only want to know things that I can know. Like, how do you put a percent on how sad a family is or how poor they are because their dad lost his job? They are 45.32% unhappy, unhappier than they were before he lost his job. You can't do that. It's out of the realm of things that Descartes said, well, these are the only things we can know with mathematical certainty. But we walk around acting like we can know things with math. So, well, a certain percent of young people go bad. What if it's your young person? You don't care what percent it is. It's 100% for you, right? So, is it easier in a world where we think of people like that, their statistics? Would it be easier to quantify whether someone's worthwhile to live?
It makes it a lot easier.
I think it makes it easier. What do you say, Dominic?
Old world where everything's measured by like exactly down to the base existence of said person instead of feelings and personal experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. I read once, this never happened to me when I was in school, but they had these terrible exercises that they would have students do. I mean, like grade school, not even high school, where it's like, say you're on a raft. Miriam's nodding, you kind of know where I'm going. And you have who's on there, like a doctor, a shopkeeper, a teacher, a mom, you have just a cross-section of society. But there's not enough food or room on the raft for all of you. Which one are you going to throw over? And then they had kids in schools debating, who's most useful, and that's horrifying. You know what? Somebody gets out of the raft and holds on, and they take turns while somebody floats on the, and then they get back in. And you don't just throw someone out of the raft. But that's utilitarianism, right? Some of you read The Unaborted Socrates with me, and Dr. Utilitarian. This is the world Raskolnikov, and remember, this is the 1800s still. We think of that as being old-fashioned times where everything was just hunky-dory. No. This Dostoevsky, this is late 19th century. And this is the picture we're getting of Russia, where things are being quantified. Okay, but here's the thing. Do we have any evidence that Raskolnikov murdered this woman because he just thought she was not an asset to society and she wasn't fit to live?
Possibly, yes, based on what he heard. But he's not that.
Okay.
And
Then,
he kept telling himself that she was like stupid, greedy, like.
okay,
etc.
okay. Does he say anything like, "Take that, you wicked old woman, and the world will be better without you"? Or no, and that might be a little overly dramatic.
When he did that whole
Pretty
thing.
quiet.
Now, okay, this is a pretty easy question. How do we explain Lizaveta? He also murdered Lizaveta. Is this understandable? What a terrible thing to ask, but I think you know what I
I
mean.
understand why he did, but he was really bad. He could have just hit. She would have ran out probably. And
Yes.
screaming for help, and then he could have escaped instead of rushing out there with the
Yes,
axe.
but she's seen him.
But then again,
I've obviously read way too many murder mysteries and watched too many because I'm like, oh, she's a witness. She's got to go. You know how this works. So we understand. But does he seem remorseful about Lizaveta? No, this thing is like, oh, I just wanted to rid the world of a terrible old woman, and I'm so sorry that you got sucked in, and, I had to do it because, you saw me and everything, but still, I'm so sorry. I'm still left with, he doesn't help anybody with the money. He gets confirmation, oh yeah, I'm like, it's destiny, I need to kill this woman, but he doesn't seem to pronounce that he's rid the world of something terrible and ornery. We're still like, dude, why would you do this thing? And so hopefully you've kind of got into the spirit of this book. Have we met, I'm sorry, I can't remember, Porfiry Petrovich, you have. He's the head of the investigation department. All right, I know, page 127, you've read up to page 1. They're talking about the evidence against the painter, right? You remember the painters that were working in the flat? They were fixing it up for a new tenant. And we hear about this Petrovich. Do we know who did it?
Yeah.
We so know who did it. So this isn't one of those books, right? It's not, oh, I wonder who committed the crime. Oh, we so know who committed the crime. We don't totally know why. We have multiple possibilities. The fun, if there is any fun in this book, and insofar as this book is a murder mystery, is how are other people going to figure it out? What's going to happen that leads other people to figure out? When I was a little girl, there was a TV show called Columbo. Do y'all know Columbo? Okay. He was Peter Falk, who was the grandpa in The Princess Bride at the beginning, who's reading to Fred Savage, if you know. Okay, it's Peter Falk. Anyway, he was a police detective, and he wore this old raincoat that looked like you just rolled out of bed, and his hair was all messed up, and he was just bumbling, like he couldn't find stuff in his pockets. He was like an idiot. He just looked like a complete idiot, but he was super smart, and he would walk around and ask random questions, and he always had this thing where he'd walk away. He's like, oh, one more thing, and then he launches some really telling question because he's working them over, the suspects. The fun about Columbo was they showed the crime at the beginning. You always know who did it. The fun was Columbo finding out who did it. This always reminds me of Columbo. And we are going to meet a police chief who is a good Columbo match. But so there's no mystery here. The mystery is why has he done this? And is he going to get away with it? Now, the name of this book is Crime and Punishment. We got the crime. We know what the crime is. And right after he kills them, as somebody mentioned, I think I asked, he's not well. Unclear how unwell he's been before. He's very, very not well after. He rushes home, and here's what it says. He began stuffing all the things into the hole under the paper. They're in, all out of sight, and the purse too, he thought gleefully, getting up and gazing blankly at the hole which bulged out more than ever. Suddenly he shuddered all over with horror. My God, he whispered in despair, what's the matter with me? Is that hidden? Is that the way to hide things? He had not reckoned on having trinkets to hide. He had only thought of money, and so had not prepared a hiding place. But now, what am I glad of, he thought. Is that hiding things? My reason's deserting me, simply. He sat down on the sofa in exhaustion and was at once shaken by another unbearable fit of shivering. Mechanically, he drew from a chair beside him his old student's winter coat, which was still warm, though almost in rags, covered himself up with it, and once more sank into drowsiness and delirium. He lost consciousness. Not more than 5 minutes had passed when he jumped up a second time and at once pounced in a frenzy on his clothes again. How could I go to sleep again with nothing done? Yes, I have not taken the loop off the armhole. I forgot it. I forgot a thing like that. Such a piece of evidence. He pulled off the noose, hurriedly cut it to pieces, and threw the bits among the linen under his pillow. Pieces of torn linen couldn't rouse suspicion, whatever happened. I think not anyway, he repeated. Standing in the middle of the room, and with painful concentration, he fell to gazing about him again at the floor and everywhere, trying to make sure he had not forgotten anything. The conviction that all his faculties, even memory, and the simplest power of reflection were failing him began to be an insufferable torture. Surely it isn't beginning already. Surely it isn't my punishment coming upon me. It is. Instantly, he's rattled. He can't think straight. He's cool as a cucumber before really, like, oh, and I'll make the test, and I've got the noose for the X. No one will see it, and he's talking to carry it in and carry it out. I've got everything planned. And then, obviously, when he's in the apartment, he completely freaks out. Lizaveta comes home, and then those guys knocking on the door, and the wonderful, nice detective book touch. It's like, oh, it's latched from the inside. Somebody's in there. You can't latch the door from the inside unless somebody weren't in there. They know somebody's in there, even though no one's answering the door. It's all falling apart. But he describes it as his punishment. His punishment is already coming. Do you think he thought there was going to be a punishment?
No.
Doesn't say he ever accounted for it. That's what he's thinking.
He didn't really account for it at all. He said, it's beginning. It's beginning. What other punishment, if he thinks his punishment is coming upon him already, what other punishment might he anticipate? Some of this is obvious. Go ahead, Dominic.
Spiritual punishment,
Okay,
the sin that he caused.
definitely spiritual punishment. And he becomes physically ill, and we're not clear what the source of this illness is. What's an obvious punishment that might come upon someone? Prison, some sort of legal punishment. So he's got physical and spiritual torment from guilt, legal punishment. But that's the first thing he says. What's the matter with me? And then he freaks out. Oh, what if my clothes are covered in blood? Now I have to go through all my clothes. What about my socks? And he can't even think. Okay, so that's punishment. Now let's look at another punishment. He's laying there. You know, he's ill. He's fading in and out of consciousness, and a police messenger shows up and says, "You've been summoned to come to the police office." Okay, what does he think immediately?
He thinks they found out.
Oh, they know. How do they know? I don't know how they know. They must have searched my room while I was asleep or whatever. What do they actually want from him?
The taxes.
Well, it's
Not
actually
the taxes, sorry, not the taxes, the debt.
the debt, the IOU. The landlady is basically suing him for the back rent. She's finally taken it to court. She's sick and tired of waiting for him to pay up, and she's suing him. So he shows up, and he's trying to play it cool, right? I've just murdered people. And I even overhear them talking about the case and I'm just trying to be cool, you know, not give myself away. But, and he's trying to explain himself. He's trying to be cozy up to the police officers, right? And say, well, it's like this, you know, I'm sorry, you know, my mom, she tries to send me money, and it's like this, and this is why I'm in debt, and try to drum up some sympathy, right?
You get this whole story out, and he's kind of like, okay, can you like quicken up?
Yeah. Move along. But it says, it was not a gloomy sensation of agonizing, everlasting solitude and remoteness took conscious form in his soul. It was not the meanness of his sentimental effusions before Ilya Petrovitch, nor the meanness of the latter's triumph over him that had caused this sudden revulsion in his heart. You know, they were kind of mocking him. I was like, buddy, like they used to say when I was a little girl, this is the world's smallest violin, and it's playing just for you. Which is just kind of a mean thing to say, but I still pull it out occasionally. Like, buddy, sing me, you know, cry me a river. I don't need to hear your sob story. He said, it's not that. Oh, what had he to do now with his own baseness, with all these petty vanities? If he'd been sentenced to be burnt at that moment, he would not have stirred, would hardly have heard the sentence to the end. Something was happening to him entirely new, sudden and unknown. It was not that he understood, but he felt with all the intensity of sensation that he could never more appeal to these people in the police office with sentimental effusions like his recent outburst, or with anything whatever, and that if they had been his own brothers and sisters and not police officers, it would have been utterly out of the question to appeal to them in any circumstance of life. He had never experienced such a strange and awful sensation. I can't appeal to these people's emotions, feelings. I'm not one of them anymore. I murdered people. It said before, he like a tortoise in a shell. You know, he didn't want to talk to the landlady. But now he's like, I totally cannot be. It's like I'm not a member of humanity anymore. He hadn't expected this. He says, deep down, this is later, deep down, hidden far away out of sight, all that seemed to him now, all his old past, his old thoughts, his old problems and theories, his old impressions, and that picture and himself and all, he felt as though he were flying upwards and everything were vanishing from his sight. I'm not who I was before. And I can't really appeal to other members of humanity on the basis of our common humanity anymore. Can you imagine, oh, God help all of us, that any of us ever does something that makes us feel like we don't even deserve to be a member of the human race anymore. he does. He didn't expect this, it says. Is this part of that spiritual punishment, you think, Dominic? Too. You know, we felt it a little bit, and I was once a young person living with my parents too. And I disobeyed, you know. And then like that feeling that you can't be open with your parents, you're hiding something from them. Like it can be something trivial when you're little. Like I ate the cookies and I wasn't supposed to. I broke the whatever that I wasn't supposed to play with, right? And you have that moment of, like my parents are the enemy. You know what I mean? Not really, but you know what I mean. I'm a little scared of them. I'm scared they will find out. If they find out, they won't feel the same way about me anymore. You probably have had this at some level, maybe over something very trivial when you were very young. But multiply it by a billion, you know. And this is how Raskolnikov feels now. I'm not a member of the human race anymore. Do you think Raskolnikov is insane? Dominic's doing a little.
Like, he goes a little bit more insane. Let's just say he's more insane than he was at the beginning of the book. I mean, there's definitely glimpses of like sanity, but he's just like he's losing his mind. In a sense, like he's just.
Can you give me an example of something that doesn't seem quite sane?
Well, all the ways he was trying to like hide the evidence, just like how obsessed he was.
Okay, okay. I stuff it in the hole. I take it out of the hole. I shred it, and I can't. And then he just lays down, and then he's like, "Oh, but I was supposed. What was I doing? I was doing that." Were you going to say something else? Yes, he has a complete delusion. Do you remember that the police chief has come and he's beating the landlady, and she's screaming, and then he comes to. He's like, "Why was he beating the landlady?" Buddy, I do not know what you were talking about. Did not happen. I'm so glad you mentioned that because as you continue reading, did I tell you to read to the end of part 3? Did I tell that? I want you to take note of people other than Raskolnikov who might be a little delusional. And it that doesn't mean they see things or hear things literally, but it means their grasp of reality is twisted. Because Raskolnikov, I don't think, is going to be the only one we're going to see that's not completely got a firm grip on reality. Sometimes maybe they make the reality what they want it to be. All right. One more thing I wanted to mention. Kind of going back and forth before he did it and after he did it. I'm sorry, that's not well done. Yeah, let me read this because it really enlightens. He's thinking this before the murder. At first, long before indeed, he had been much occupied with one question: why almost all crimes are so badly concealed and so easily detected, and why almost all criminals leave such obvious traces. He had come gradually to many different and curious conclusions, and in his opinion, the chief reason lay not so much in the material impossibility of concealing the crime, as in the criminal himself. Almost every criminal is subject to a failure of will and reasoning power by a childish and phenomenal heedlessness, at the very instant when prudence and caution are most essential. It was his conviction that this eclipse of reason and failure of willpower attacked a man like a disease, developed gradually and reached its highest point just before the perpetration of the crime, continued with equal violence at the moment of the crime and for longer or shorter time after, according to the individual case, then passed away like any other disease. The question whether the disease gives rise to the crime or whether the crime from its own peculiar nature is always accompanied by something of the nature of disease, he did not feel yet able to decide. Isn't that interesting? Because in his case, is it accompanied by disease? Is his crime accompanied? Yes. He's not totally okay before, but he's really ill afterwards, feverishly ill. And he says, why are crimes always detected? Because The reasoning power fails you at the moment when it's most important for you to keep a cool head and do everything the way you planned it. Isn't this exactly what happened to him? Is Raskolnikov intelligent? Does he strike you as an intelligent man? Like a deep thinker, intelligent sort, or not?
Like he definitely thinks deep. He definitely thinks deep. Like I do think he is like intelligent, if that makes sense, but like at the same time just like it's not intelligent just to go kill somebody for no reason.
No, it's not. No, it's not. He must think he has a reason, but he loses it completely while he's there. And he hears people coming, and Lizaveta comes in and everything, and he gets flustered, and he doesn't take what he meant to take, and can't find the cash box, and blah, blah, blah. But this is what he's told himself before. Well, you know, the problem is that there's often disease that accompanies it. So you might think, well, he's thought it all out. Why in the world does he go ahead and do it? Because he knows this is what happens to people that do this sort of thing. Well, listen to what he says next. When he reached these conclusions, he decided that in his own case, there could not be such a morbid reaction, that his reason and will would remain unimpaired at the time of his carrying out the design, for the single reason that his design was not a crime. I know, that's the face, Alexander. It's not really a crime. We will omit all the process by means of which he arrived at this last conclusion. We may only add that the practical, purely material difficulties of the affair occupied a secondary position in his mind. One has but to keep one's willpower and reason to deal with them, and they will all be overcome at the time when one has familiarized oneself with the minutest details of the business. Everything will be fine. All you got to do is plan it out. And besides, I'm not really committing a crime. Why could he possibly? It says, the author has said we're going to omit all the details of how he came to that conclusion. How do you think he came to that conclusion? Okay, but on what planet would this not be a crime? I mean, we could say that. He's just a nut job. But he just doesn't talk like a nut job. You know what I mean? This is all very reasonable. It's like, oh, I've studied these cases, and this is how it goes. You just have to keep your resolution firm and your will power strong. What that we've talked about already here today might make him come to the conclusion that it wouldn't really be a crime. What do you think, Miriam? Oh.
She thinks, you know, she's a bad person, and maybe he doesn't see it as a crime.
Doing the world a favor getting rid of this lady.
After those guys talking in the bar, like he's like, I'm gonna do the world good by doing this.
It's a net positive. I'm a benefactor of mankind. I'm a benefactor of Lizaveta, except that I'm going to murder her too. So he's convinced himself. I was going to ask an unanswerable question. I was going to ask, do you think all criminals convince themselves of this? But I don't think so. I think people do things and they totally know it's wrong. It's because they want to.
But there are definitely a few cases where I think people could think that way.
That it wasn't really wrong.
Yeah.
Because it was for a good reason. I had good motives. I think a scary number of people do think that that's all right, that the ends justifies the means. Victor Frankenstein thought that, didn't he? Right? If I could conquer death and bring back the dead, you know, like just robbing a few graves or whatever, you know, making some undead creature, it's fine. It's totally fine. Okay, let me see if there's anything else. Or anything I want to warn you about coming up. I want you to read through part 3, look for delusional, we'll call it delusional characters. And just to remind you, so in case you didn't jot down the name because you didn't think they were going to be important, Svidrigailov is the guy who was the head of the household that was harassing Dunia. Lutzen is the guy who's Dunia's going to marry. And
Is it a longer first name?
he does. And he's also a Piotr Petrovich, and so is the Porfiry Petrovich, is the police guy, yes.
Same with Aliona Ivanova. The pawnbroker has the same last name as Katerina.
Yes, yes. And this is, in case you're interested, all the Viches and the Ovnas in their middle names, the middle name is your patronymic. So Ovich means son of. So Ivanovich is son of Ivan. And Ovna means daughter of. Ivanovna is daughter of Ivan. And Ivan is like John or Joe. Do you know what I mean? So there's lots of Ivanovich or Ivanovnas, is why that pops in so much. Yeah, most of the time from the context, you'll know. One guy that I just went ahead and reread the whole thing, just ahead of you guys. And there's two guys whose name starts with Z that are easy to mix up. Zosimov is the doctor. Zametov, I had to look him up. It says he's the head clerk in the police office. He's not the police chief, but he's a police officer. He works in the police office, right? So Zametov, Zosimov. But generally, you can tell, oh, this guy he's talking like a policeman. This guy's taking his pulse, I don't know, and like he's the doctor. Does anybody have a question that we didn't talk about on the reading you've done so far? Something that happened and you're not sure what happened? Okay, awesome. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Bring me your Moby Dick paper. Read through the end of part 3. Summarize the chapters. Keep a cast list, as it were. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye, guys.